this is Russ Fagle from Eastern Iowa Arts Academy, and today we're going to do an illustration of a saltwater crab, and we're going to use a black and white technique of combining line art and hatching, which is just simply making small marks with your pen or pencil to give both texture and value to show a three-dimensional volume. We're going to start drawing our crab, and I am looking at reference off screen, but find a good solid reference photograph to show you an accurate depiction. And I do always recommend using photographs rather than other people's art, because if you're using, even if it's a pretty realistic piece of art, it's still once removed and you're looking at an interpretation, so your drawing will be twice removed from the original. So I really encourage you to use photographs for your reference, and it's always good if you have the ability, the opportunity to use direct live reference, of course. Also, in case you don't have a crab though nearby, use a photograph. So I'm just drawing half of this crab with very simple shapes and light marks that I can go back and clean up and darken as I am comfortable with the proportions. Because I'm doing this on an iPad, I'm able to make a copy of this half and then flop it for the other side and then make some adjustments. If you're not using an iPad, of course, you just draw the other side accurately, but use those simple shapes, and breaking this down into the body, the legs, and the pincers. These are quite simple shapes. It's just a matter of breaking them down. So just adding some more detail here and trying to look for ways that I can keep this from being too symmetrical. You want to have your drawings be asymmetrical, which means they're a little different on both sides, to give some more interest and to keep the monotony from creeping into your drawings. So I'm going to change one of the pincers here to give me some of that. But in the meantime, I'm just starting to establish some value, which using these hatching lines, which are just individual small line marks with your pen or pencil. And you can crosshatch, which means you do an opposite direction over top of the marks that you've already made to give you a darker value. But the majority of this is going to be just hash marks. I like to use this technique because it gives a sense of direction and interesting texture to your components of your subject, and it keeps it, I think, interesting because it gives a sense of detail. And again, those directional lines, I think, are really useful in creating interest and a sense of just dynamicism across your drawing. Just filling in some simple detail where I'm gonna want more tonal detail as opposed to lines. I'm trying to keep the actual lines to a minimum in the body of the crab here, but I am drawing some light marks to indicate where those shapes are going to be, and then defining those with those hatching lines. You can stay somewhat loose with these lines. A little bit of a sketchy appearance can keep a lively, dynamic look to your drawing. Get those proportions accurate, and you have a little more leeway in how you apply value and texture. You don't want a mechanical looking drawing. You want something that looks organic and alive. So having some fun with how you lay these lines down, and I'm establishing just where the shadows are going to be and laying those in first to give me a sense of depth and dimension, and then just kind of building out the rest of the value from there. You'll see as we continue, I will go back over areas and kind of work them a little more to bring the darker out and highlight some of those lighter areas. I'm going in now and going to refine that pincher on the right hand side to give us some variety and to make it a little more asymmetrical. Again, you want variety and you want to avoid symmetry in much of your compositions. A little bit of it can add stability, especially on a subject like this. Part of the anatomy of the crab is symmetrical, so some of it's fine, but you want to add asymmetry to give you some interest and some variety. That's very important. Once I've gone in and laid down some initial value in where some of the defining darker areas are going to be, now I'm starting to go and reaffirm those areas with darker strokes, and I'm allowed to push a little further, achieving some more contrast. And using short marks like that, I'm getting texture that is being sort of magnified because I'm using darker strokes. And just watch how the direction of the lines are helping define the contours of the surface of this crab, so it doesn't look just like it's a flat shell. I'm drawing this on an iPad, so I'm able to use just a white color on my same brush. If you're drawing this with traditional pencils or ink, you can use a white opaque gel pen. You could use a white China marker or a white chalk pencil, and you can always use a fine brush or a fountain pen with white paint. There's a variety of techniques, and I'm just going in now and dabbing some white areas that are larger that would be nice to use like a brush with some opaque white paint. Acrylic paint would work nice to put some of these larger spots of reflection, and that's given me a feeling of, you can see on the lower left sub pincher underneath the body where I've started to put some of those larger white areas. Using all of that spectrum of a grayscale in your drawing. So we've got black areas on the bottom pincers, we've got white highlights on the legs and a little bit on the body, and then we have all manner of gray scales that are achieved with our hatching technique. Now, when you're doing this with a pencil or charcoal, you can get midtones by shading or rubbing with your finger with a paper stump. But this particular technique, we are basically doing a line art technique where we're using these hatch marks. Just as important using hash marks like this in a line art context to create those different levels of gray. So I'm just adding some more bold highlights, as we discussed earlier, to to just give us some finishing touches and give us that home stretch of the look we want with those glossy, high contrast on a hard surface with some light hitting it and possibly some wetness. The key here is just to not overdo it. If you're working digitally like I am here, you can experiment a little bit and go back and forth. You can undo, you can at this point make a copy of your file and try several different finishing techniques. That's a technique I do often. If you're working in a traditional environment, you may do some smaller sketches of this and then do some value studies to experiment with some different highlighting and shadow techniques at the end to really push those values, both light and dark. It's often good to do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 little thumbnail versions, real small sketches of this, and work out different scenarios of your values so you can go back to your finished drawing and be confident to really push those tones to where you want them to give you maximum effect. So we're finished here, and I hope this was informative, and I encourage you to try this technique. And it's fun to do a series of items that are similar, and enjoy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's lesson and found it helpful. It's a great technique that's a lot of fun, and I wish you good luck.